Most people think the moment an avoidant person pulls back, that tells you everything you need to know. They think distance means disinterest, hesitation means indifference, and mixed signals mean the answer is no. It doesn't always work like that. Sometimes the most important part of the story begins the moment he changes in a way that confuses you. And if you're watching that shift happen right now, if you're replaying the exact phrase he used, the exact look on his face, the exact moment his energy changed, and you've been trying to decide whether you misunderstood it, then I need you to hear this carefully. Not every retreat is rejection. Not every delay is a lack of feeling. And not every man who is struggling to move toward you is struggling because he feels nothing. Sometimes he is struggling because he feels too much and has no mature way to hold it. That does not mean you excuse bad behavior. It does not mean you abandon your self-respect. It does not mean you volunteer for confusion and call it love. It means you learn to recognize the glitch. The moment where his pattern stops looking smooth. The moment where the choreography of distance stops being clean. The moment where a man who is used to protecting himself begins, even briefly, to reveal the cost of that protection. And that is where a lot of women make a mistake. They see the first real crack in his defenses. And because it doesn't look romantic enough, fast enough, or certain enough, they walk away from the very moment that was telling the truth. Here's the truth. You are not wrong for being tired. You are not wrong for feeling that your heart has had enough of ambiguity. You are not wrong if a part of you wants to say, I've done this before. I know where this goes. I am not going to stand here waiting for a man to discover his emotions like he's lost in his own house. I understand that, because if you have ever been told he isn't ready, or I need space, or I'm just overwhelmed, or I don't know what I want, you have learned that those words often arrive wrapped around disappointment. They are often the soft language of limitation. And when you have been hurt before, your nervous system becomes a detective. It starts searching for the earliest sign that this will end the same way. It wants to protect you by making a fast decision. It wants to spare you the slow humiliation of hoping. But protection can become distortion. And that matters here. Because the question is not whether you should tolerate the bare minimum. You should not. The question is whether you know how to tell the difference between a man who is comfortably keeping you in orbit and a man who is becoming uncomfortable because his feelings are asking more of him than his old defenses know how to manage. Those are not the same man. One enjoys your warmth without offering his own. The other becomes visibly unsettled by how much you matter. One wants the benefits of access without the responsibility of claim. The other starts malfunctioning because connection is asking him to give up the strategy that once kept him safe. One keeps the dynamic stable in his favor. The other begins to lose the upper hand with himself. And if you don't know the difference, you will either stay too long with the wrong man or leave too early with the right one. Picture this. It's 11 at night. Your phone is face down on the nightstand. You've already told yourself you're not going to check it again, but your mind keeps drifting back to the last conversation. Maybe he went quiet after getting close. Maybe he said something vulnerable and then disappeared into a cooler version of himself the next day. Maybe he started a sentence with unusual honesty and then pulled back just when it mattered. And now you're lying there asking the question that can steal weeks from a woman's life. Was that real? Or was that just another half step from someone emotionally unavailable? It is a brutal question because both possibilities hurt. If it was real, you feel the ache of not knowing what to do with it. If it wasn't, you feel the ache of almost being fooled again. And that tension is exactly why you have to slow down here. Because the answer is not found in panic, it is found in pattern. Here's what most people miss. Avoidant behavior is not simply distance. It is conflict. It is the internal collision between desire and self-protection. So if a man is truly avoidant, not casually selfish, not manipulative, not indifferent, but genuinely avoidant, then when his feelings deepen, His behavior often becomes less coherent, not more. That is the glitch, the contradiction. He moves closer and then startles himself. He says something sincere and then acts strangely the next day. He initiates, then withdraws. He looks more affected than he wants to admit. He becomes more tender in one moment and more defended in the next. Why? Because closeness is activating two systems at once. One part of him wants connection. Another part of him has old limitations that interpret connection as danger, engulfment, loss of control, loss of autonomy, loss of the upper hand. So when those systems clash, you don't get a smooth romantic progression. You get disruption. You get irregularity. You get an emotional stutter. And here's something most people don't see coming. The very shift that makes you want to run may be the first evidence that you matter in a way he cannot easily compartmentalize. Now, let me be clear about something. Mattering to him is not the same as being matched by him. Feeling deeply is not the same as loving well. I need you to hear that distinction because too many women build a fantasy out of a man's intensity while ignoring his capacity. Emotional impact and emotional maturity are not the same thing. A man can be deeply affected by you and still be incapable of meeting you consistently. So I am not telling you to romanticize confusion. I am telling you to learn what confusion is made of. Is it made of care colliding with fear, or is it made of convenience colliding with your standards? One deserves observation, the other deserves distance. Let me be clear about one thing. The glitch is not him disappearing for 3 weeks and then liking your story. The glitch is not him texting at midnight because he feels lonely. The glitch is not him giving you just enough to keep you hopeful while preserving all his options. That is not tenderness buried under fear. That is a pattern built around access without accountability. The glitch I'm talking about has a different texture. It has sincerity in it. It has disorientation in it. It has a kind of unwanted honesty leaking through the cracks. He says more than he meant to. He reveals something and then looks like he regrets being seen. He reacts to the idea of losing you in a way that surprises even him. He notices your absence more than he expected. He becomes more present after a moment of vulnerability, not because he's suddenly transformed, but because something in him has been touched and cannot pretend otherwise. That is a different energy. I'm going to say something and some of you will disagree. A man can love you and still pull away, not because love is weak, because his structures are weak, because the walls he built to survive his past do not know the difference between intimacy and threat. And if you've ever loved someone avoidant, that sentence lands like both relief and grief. Relief because it explains something. Grief because explanation is not the same as resolution. You can understand his pattern and still suffer inside it. You can see the wound and still be cut by the behavior, which is why your job is never to become the translator of his silence while abandoning your own dignity. Your job is to see clearly, to read the dynamic without losing your center, to recognize when the pattern is opening and when it is simply repeating. Here's the thing. If this shift in him is real, if this glitch is meaningful, your next move is not to chase it. It is not to lean over the table and finish his emotional sentence for him. It is not to reward every tiny scrap of vulnerability with instant access to your full heart. Why? Because if he is truly in that uncomfortable middle ground, he needs to feel the reality of his own experience. He needs to meet the weight of it without you doing all the emotional labor for him. He didn't expect you to stay grounded. He expected you to rush in and make it easier for him instead. And when you don't do that, when you remain warm but boundaried, kind but clear, available but not collapsing, he is forced into something he has been avoiding for years. He has to locate himself. Think about it like this. Some people spend years holding a volleyball underwater. They use pressure, habit, distraction, busyness, logic, detachment, all the little techniques that keep feeling beneath the surface. An avoidant man often does this with attachment. He keeps the ball down. He calls it independence. He calls it needing space. He calls it taking things slow. And sometimes, to be fair, some of that is genuine. But then someone arrives who makes keeping that ball underwater more and more exhausting. Someone whose presence starts to matter. Someone whose absence starts to register. Someone who cannot be fitted neatly into his old narrative. And suddenly the pressure required to maintain the same emotional distance becomes immense. That strain is the glitch, the slip, the wobble in the pattern. The moment the ball starts to rise, he starts to wonder why you feel different. And here's the thing, that question matters more than any dramatic declaration. He starts to notice he cannot control the narrative as easily as he used to. And here's what's actually happening underneath all of this. Control has been his safety. Distance has been his safety. Predictability has been his safety. So when you evoke care in him that begins to threaten those strategies, he may not look romantic. He may look disorganized. He may look contradictory. He may say, I don't know what's happening with me. And the temptation for you is to interpret that as weakness and leave before your hope gets hurt again. But if you leave every time someone's humanity appears in an unpolished form, you may miss the rare moments when someone is not playing a game at all. They are just losing the old one. And here's something most people don't see coming. Your silence in that moment is often more revealing than any speech you could give. Not punishment, not icy distance, not a strategy designed to create mystery for the sake of manipulation. I'm not talking about performance. I'm talking about self-respect. The kind of silence that says, I am not here to force clarity out of you. I am not here to overfunction because you are underfunctioning. I am not here to become the wings on your back while you keep both feet off the ground. Your silence becomes a boundary, a mirror, a refusal to participate in the old choreography. And when that happens, if he feels something real, the silence stops being empty. It becomes an echo chamber for every feeling he was hoping to mute. He didn't expect you to go quiet with dignity. He expected you to plead for reassurance instead. He expected you to send the long message explaining your heart, making your case, softening the standard, handing him permission to remain vague. And when you don't, when you choose dignity over panic, something shifts in the power dynamic. Not because you are trying to win, because the truth becomes harder for him to escape. Your absence creates a void, and the void is not dramatic, it is not theatrical, it is not revenge, it is just space where your energy used to be, but that space begins to speak. It becomes the first stage of reckoning. I want to pause on that for a second, because a lot of women misunderstand what silence is for. Silence is not a spell. It is not an algorithm for making someone miss you. It is not a trick to reclaiming the upper hand. If you use silence as a gimmick while inwardly vibrating with desperation, the energy of that desperation will still direct your choices. You'll break the silence too early. You'll watch his every move. You'll build his narrative in your own mind and call that intuition. That's not silence. That's surveillance. Real silence is different. Real silence is when you stop auditioning for a role in his life and return to your own. It is when you stop supplying meaning to a man who has not yet learned to speak with consistency. It is when your self-worth becomes louder to you than his ambiguity. And here's where the image matters. First, there is the void, the sudden absence of your reaching, your smoothing over, your availability on demand. Then that void becomes a vacuum because he realizes something familiar is no longer cushioning him from the consequences of his indecision. Then the vacuum becomes an echo because every memory of your warmth begins bouncing back in a quieter room. Then the echo becomes weight because what once felt optional now feels strangely heavy in its absence. Then the weight becomes inquiry. Why is she not chasing? Why does this feel different? Why am I thinking about her now? Then inquiry becomes reckoning because he has to confront the possibility that he did not simply lose convenience. He lost a woman with dignity. And if he keeps running from that reckoning, the whole thing becomes like a glass terrarium he built to protect himself, transparent enough to see love outside it, sealed enough to keep him alone inside it. That is what real absence can do. It does not attack him, it reveals him. He starts to wonder whether your silence means you're done. And here's the thing, that question is where his feelings stop being theoretical. He starts to replay the moments he's brushed past too lightly. And here's the truth, memory changes when loss enters the room. He starts to feel the discomfort of not having the same easy access. And here's what most people miss. Access is often the anesthetic. Remove the anesthetic and the feeling wakes up. This is why an avoidant man may seem calm when you're there and more stirred when you are gone. Your availability helps regulate his anxiety while also protecting him from the consequences of choosing. Once that availability is no longer guaranteed, the emotional math changes. He didn't expect you to remove yourself from the orbit. He expected you to remain a steady planet around his chaos instead. He expected your care to keep circling, no matter how inconsistent his own became. And when you stop doing that, he loses something more than contact. He loses the illusion that he could postpone clarity indefinitely. That is why the glitch matters, because it often appears right before he realizes the old pattern is not going to keep working. It appears when he senses your energy leaving the old script. It appears when he can no longer assume you will stay in place while he sorts himself out on borrowed time. And that realization can make him do one of two things. It can make him retreat deeper into his defenses, or it can make him finally move toward truth. Now, let me explain something slowly. The shift you are looking for is not perfection. It is movement toward accountability. If he is affected but not growing, that is not enough. If he is confused but still expects access, that is not enough. If he says he has feelings but cannot tolerate the smallest amount of relational responsibility, that is not enough. The standard matters. Your self-respect matters. The question is not, does he love me somewhere inside all this? The question is, when love asks something of him, does he begin to rise, however imperfectly, toward courage? Or does he continue using emotional immaturity as a hiding place? One deserves patience in measured doses. The other deserves a closed door. Imagine the difference between a man who says, I'm overwhelmed, and then vanishes, and a man who says, I'm overwhelmed, but I don't want to disappear on you, so I need a day and I will call you tomorrow. Both may feel fear, both may be activated, but only one is beginning to practice care. Only one is showing that your experience exists in the room with his. Love is not proven by internal intensity alone. It is proven by increasing consideration. That is the real shift. Not poetic words, not one perfect vulnerable conversation. Not chemistry so strong it feels magnetic. Consideration. A man growing the ability to hold both his feelings and the effect of his behavior at the same time. He didn't expect you to require congruence. He expected you to be moved by glimpses instead. He expected you to mistake the opening of his heart for the completion of his work. And this is where so many women get caught, because a glimpse can feel intoxicating. A moment of tenderness from someone usually guarded can feel like a reunion before there has even been a relationship. It can feel like finally being chosen. But a glimpse is not a home. A breakthrough is not a pattern. You must let repetition tell the truth. Has he become more honest, more available, more intentional, more respectful of your boundary, more willing to name what is happening, rather than leaving you to carry the entire emotional narrative alone? Those are the signs that the glitch is real, not because they are dramatic, but because they are sustained. Here's what most people miss. The avoidant man often experiences your steadiness as both comforting and unsettling. Comforting because your warmth offers safety. Unsettling because your steadiness asks him to become visible. And visibility is hard for someone who has spent years surviving by staying partially hidden. So when you stay calm and clear, you become a mirror he cannot easily distort. If you chase him, he can tell himself the story that you are simply more invested, more emotional, more attached. That allows him to keep the spotlight on your energy. But if you remain centered, if you neither collapse into silence as punishment nor flood him with persuasion, then the spotlight shifts. Suddenly, he has to look at his own energy, his own limitations, his own fear. That power shift is often what determines whether he grows or runs. I need you to hear me on this. You are not responsible for proving to him that love is safe. You are not his rehabilitation center. You are not the woman who must finally be extraordinary enough to undo his history. That fantasy ruins women because it keeps them overinvested in potential and underinvested in evidence. The mature question is simpler. Is he showing me, through repeated behavior, that he can meet the moment he says he feels, not perfectly, not instantly, but actually? If the answer is no, then your silence becomes final. Your dignity becomes the close of the chapter, not because he never felt anything, but because feeling was not enough to make him available. And yet, if the answer is yes, even in small but genuine ways, then do not sabotage that because you are addicted to certainty on day one. Some people have learned to read any hesitation as doom. I understand why. But life is not always that clean. Real growth in someone avoidant may look awkward at first. He may sound clumsy. He may try and fail and then try again. He may need to say, I don't fully understand why I get like this, but I know I don't want to lose this. That is not polished. It is human. The question is whether the humanity continues, whether the effort deepens, whether the responsibility expands, whether your nervous systems, over time, begins to feel more settled, not less. That is how you know you are not just being seduced by the idea of the comeback. Here's the thing. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is not walk away at the first sign of discomfort. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away the moment discomfort reveals there is no real movement underneath it. Wisdom is knowing which is which. If he is only orbiting, leave the orbit. If he is actually crossing the distance, do not punish him for not knowing how to sprint what he has barely learned to walk. That does not mean waiting forever. It means allowing a little room for what is true to declare itself. A little room, not endless room, not your whole life on hold. Just enough space for pattern to reveal whether love is trying to become behavior. He starts to wonder whether he has misread your value. And here's the thing, that question can change a man. He starts to notice that what he thought was casual was not casual at all. And here's what's actually happening underneath all of this. Your self-respect is becoming visible. There is something profoundly magnetic about a woman who does not try to climb into a man's confusion and make a home there, not because she is cold, because she is clear. She does not offer herself as a second choice. She does not lower the standard to avoid the pain of losing a possibility. She does not convert scraps into promises. That kind of dignity has magnetism because it cannot be manipulated by uncertainty. It requires truth. And let me be clear about something. Magnetic is not the same as elusive. Mystery is not the same as withholding. You do not become more attractive by becoming a performance of indifference. That is another script entirely, and men sense it more than women realize. Real mystery is simply what remains when you stop over-explaining yourself. Real mystery is what happens when you allow your life to become larger than the need to manage his perception. Real mystery is the natural result of a woman returning to her center. She doesn't narrate every feeling. She doesn't hand over every page of her inner world to a man who hasn't earned the full book. She stays honest. She stays kind. But she stops trying to be immediately knowable in order to feel safe. That is different. I want to walk through this with you one piece at a time. If you see the shift, if you notice the glitch, if you sense that his behavior has become inconsistent because his feelings have become inconvenient to his old defenses, your task is threefold. First, do not overinterpret one moment. Watch for repetition. Second, do not overgive in response to vulnerability. Match effort with effort. Third, do not abandon your own life while waiting for his clarity to form. That last part is crucial because your silence is not just doing something to him. It is doing something to you. It is returning you to yourself. This is the part nobody's going to like hearing. Sometimes the woman who gets hurt most by an avoidant man is not the woman he rejects. It is the woman who slowly rejects herself trying to stay close to him. She becomes hypervigilant. She shrinks her needs. She starts calling anxiety intuition. She mistakes crumbs for progress because she is starving for certainty. She begins to live on his timing, his ambiguity, his emotional weather. And one day she wakes up and realizes the breakup happened in pieces long before anyone named it. That is why your silence matters even if he never comes back. Because your silence interrupts your own pattern. It stops the self-abandonment. It gives your dignity somewhere to stand again. The you he is dealing with now is not the same you who first met him. That matters. The woman who once would have sent 3 follow-up texts may no longer exist. The woman who once would have accepted just friends while secretly hoping for more may no longer exist. The woman who once would have mistaken longing for compatibility may no longer exist. You are changing too, quietly, in ways that matter. And if he does come forward, if he does try to cross the distance, he is not meeting the same version of you. He is meeting someone with a stronger boundary, a clearer standard, a more settled sense of self-worth. That is why your silence is not empty. It is rebuilding someone. He didn't expect you to outgrow the old pattern. He expected you to stay emotionally available to the same old script instead. He expected history to keep working in his favor. He expected your care to remain fixed while his choices remained flexible. And if that expectation begins to fail, then whether he realizes it or not, he is standing in front of a woman who has begun reclaiming herself. That can be attractive to a healthy man and unsettling to an unhealthy one. A healthy man will lean in and rise. An unhealthy one will accuse you of changing, becoming distant, becoming hard to read. He will say this because the old access is gone, but that does not mean you became colder. It may just mean you became whole. Now, let me explain something slowly. When you stop chasing, you do not create love. You reveal it, or you reveal its absence. Both are useful. If there is love there, your self-respect gives it a chance to emerge in a more honest form. If there is no love there, your self-respect saves you from a longer illusion. Either way, you win clarity. Either way, you stop negotiating with the bare minimum. Either way, the narrative shifts away from, how do I keep him interested, and toward what is actually true here. That is one of the most important power shifts a woman can experience. Not the power to control him, the power to stop abandoning herself in the presence of uncertainty. So what do you do practically? You make your world touchable again. You pick up the phone and call the friend you've been meaning to call. You go outside even when your first instinct is to stay in bed and replay the same conversation. You move your body, not because fitness is a distraction, but because grief lives physically and needs somewhere to go. You clear one small space in your home that has started to feel like a waiting room. You stop treating your life like an intermission before his next message. You retie the loose ends. You answer the email. You make the appointment. You cook food that makes you feel looked after. These things sound small. They are not. They tell your nervous system that your life is still happening. Here's the truth. Healing is rarely glamorous. Reclaiming your center is not some cinematic comeback where one morning you wake up radiant and untouched. It is quieter than that. It is often you choosing not to check your phone for the 7th time in 10 minutes. It is you noticing the urge to explain yourself and deciding not to. It is you letting the silence stay silent for one more evening. It is you remembering that your self-worth cannot depend on whether someone else has enough courage to meet his own feelings. These are small acts, but they build a different woman. And if he reaches out, if he comes back around, if he says he has been thinking, if he reveals, in however imperfect a way, that your absence created an echo he could not ignore, then you do not collapse into relief. You stay present. You listen. You watch. You ask yourself one calm question. Is this man offering clarity or is he seeking comfort? Is he moving toward responsibility or just toward the soothing presence of someone he now realizes he misses? Missing you is not the same as choosing you. Feeling the void is not the same as crossing it. Longing is not commitment. Regret is not readiness. Let his actions answer what his emotions have started. He starts to wonder if he has lost the woman who understood him. And here's the thing. Understand him was never supposed to mean excusing him. He starts to feel the absence of your warmth. And here's what most people miss. Warmth is valuable only when it is not endlessly available on poor terms. He starts to imagine the reality of you moving on, becoming full, becoming oriented around your own life again. And here's the truth. That image can shake a man more than your anger ever could, because anger still centers him. Dignity does not. I need you to hear one more thing. There is no prize for being the woman who saw potential that never turned into character. There is no medal for loyalty to someone's future self while their present self keeps hurting you. Love without responsibility becomes sorrow. Chemistry without consideration becomes anxiety. Hope without evidence becomes self-betrayal. These are hard sentences, but they protect you. Because in the middle of longing, people start editing reality. They start making a thesis out of exceptions and excuses out of patterns. Stay with patterns. Patterns tell the truth. And here's something most people don't see coming. Sometimes your willingness not to walk away immediately is not for him. It is for you. So that you know you responded with maturity, not fear. So that if this becomes a goodbye, it is not because your old wound grabbed the wheel too fast. And sometimes your willingness to walk away, even after seeing a real shift, is also for you. Because the shift came too late, or too weakly, or without enough evidence to trust it, and that is allowed. The existence of feeling does not obligate you to stay. The presence of love does not eliminate the need for capacity. You get to choose the life that protects your dignity. So if you see the glitch, do not panic. Do not romanticize it either. Observe it. Respect it. Test it against behavior. Let it mean something only when it starts becoming something. If he loves you, truly, then the shift will not remain a private storm inside him forever. It will begin to organize into effort, into honesty, into steadier presence, into the kind of care that no longer leaves you guessing every other day. And if it does not, then your answer is still here. Your self-respect is still here. Your life is still here. Your silence after confusion is not weakness. It is discernment. Your silence after mixed signals is not passivity. It is a boundary. Your silence after glimpsing his feelings is not game playing. It is the refusal to carry both hearts while he carries none of the risk. That matters. That changes the dynamic. That reveals the truth faster than chasing ever will. And if love is there, real love, not fantasy, not orbiting, not the bare minimum dressed up as complexity, then it will have to come find you in the open, not in the shadows of ambiguity. Not in the half-light of convenient affection, in the open, where words and actions have to meet, where self-respect is visible, where dignity has not been traded away for hope. That is the standard. That is the self-respect. That is the dignity. And whether he crosses that distance or not, you do not lose by standing there. You only lose when you leave yourself to keep him.